All right, thank you so much for the introduction. My name is Mónica. I am a medical anthropologist from Guatemala, but I've had the privilege to study in Switzerland, my PhD, and also two postdocs. So I know how wonderful it has been to collaborate with colleagues from many different disciplines in complex and ambitious projects. So I want to share with you today a bit of the Maya ethnomedicine, specifically focusing on plants and sunlight because we are in the Daylight Academy, but how this leads to a One Health approach. Since the pandemic, we all kind of have heard it, that it may be the approach to deal with the complexities that we face, and will continue to face. And so generally, I want to take you through the context, some principles of Maya medicine that are important to get to the point of One Health in Maya thought. And we'll go through environmental links to plants and sunlight. So briefly, Guatemala is that little red dot here. It's in Central America. There are 60 million people, but it's a multicultural society. We have 25 different languages. So about 42% of the population are of Maya origin, and 22 different languages belong to the Maya root language, plus Xinca, Garifuna, and Spanish. But we're also a very poor country where half the population lives under the poverty line. And so that's the linguistic map of Guatemala. That's the oldest city you've probably seen. It's from the classic Maya period. It's the peak of the classic period. It's called Tikal. And this is our modern city, located in the valley in the Central Highlands. We are surrounded by volcanoes. We have over 100 in the country. It's a very diverse, but richly biodiverse country with lots of different species, as you will see. And it's important to know that Guatemala has a public health system that sometimes collapses, quite often. During the pandemic, it did. But this is not the only offer of services for the population. Actually, 2/3 of the population do not really rely on the modern allopathic medical system, but on the traditional Maya medical system. It's in line with the reports from the World Health Organization about traditional and alternative medicine, that in Latin America, 2/3 of our population relies on traditional medicine. So we have this coexistence and sometimes fight between the two knowledge systems, even though for most indigenous people, clearly the Maya system is the preferred one and the most accessible one. There's 4,000 years of practice and transmission of this knowledge passed on since 2000 before present era to today. And the data I'm going to present comes from the collaboration with 4 different projects. With the ETH, we did the MACO project, which was my PhD. I'm very happy to have 2 of the professors in my advisory board here, Professor Michael Heinrich from University College London and Professor Valle, who helped us look at cancer. But we also went through a project in One Health with the Swiss CPH, Jakob Zinstag, in University of Zurich with Dr. Caroline Make, and now again with the Swiss CPH on another project. I just briefly want to say that this data is only possible because we follow intercultural transdisciplinary approaches. And that is typically the organization of an advisory board, which is composed of academics from Europe and Guatemala, government officials, industry sector, and community through Maya councils and groups from the community, because complex problem solving will not function without any of these actors sitting in the table. So we work with equal footing, where Maya scientists are scientists, the same as every other scientist. And this is coming from the epistemologies of the South, where we are trying to get an ecology of knowledge systems. It's a way of decolonizing research, which is important for a country like Guatemala with a very, very complex colonial history. So our meetings look a bit like this, and it's full of very different people, very different disciplines, ways of thinking, preferences. But in this particular case, our projects have represented 2 particular knowledge systems, one based on the cell concept and DNA, and another one based on energy and different ways of visualizing the world. And the question has been, how do we bridge the 2? So going into sunlight in the Maya world, there's a start in the Popol Vuh, which is equivalent to what you would call the Bible. It's a sacred book of the Quiché people. It says, the Peu and Kukumats join thoughts and come third on how to give life, and how clarity would come so that life could bring dawn. And so they said, let it be done, let emptiness be filled, may water retreat, so earth can rise. Let there be light in the sky and earth. And then they created humanity. So from Maya conception, from the very, very beginning, the force that allowed creation to exist is the sun. And you will see throughout my presentation how the sun is clearly embedded in every aspect of daily life. This is a representation of Inichahau, the sun god, and that's the sun glyph, which you'll recognize later in a principle of Maya medicine. And he gives the possibility for the corn god to exist, Hunhunahpu, which is the giver of sustenance of human life. In the Maya world, corn is the basic staple. And our skin, humans in the Maya cosmogony, were made out of corn. So you see again, over and over in many aspects of the Maya thought in Mesoamerica, all of Middle America, that the sun always dictates the rhythm of human life. That maybe you saw in 2012 is the sunstone depicting the 5 eras of the world. It was misrepresented as predicting the destruction of the world. And I'll show you a calendaric round where we can see that it's not that. It's just that the sun is the way for humans to understand our position in the cosmos. It's a reference point. That's why all the buildings in the Maya world were always aligned to, there's a picture behind that shows how the sun has been the reference in the microcosmos of life and the macrocosmos in Maya thought. And so one of the first principles I want to share with you is a principle in Maya medicine called Kahtuk, which means all constitutive elements of life must be in equilibrium. And again, then you see the glyph of the sun, which represents Kahtuk, these 4 cardinal points aligned. And this is the very ancient picture representing the axis mundi, or the tree of life that unites heaven, earth, and everything in creation. And you can see that the main cardinal point in all of Maya thought is always to the east. Maya people do not invoke first north. They always invoke east because it is the place where the sun rises and gives life. And it represents our physical body, our blood, and our ability to exist in a physical shape. It also represents element fire. To the west is where the sun dies. So that's black, and it represents also earth, the element earth. To the south is the element of water, represented in yellow, which also means the world of emotions. And in white to the north, then we see the cold wind of the north coming into the planet, as the elder says, that's white, and it represents the world of thoughts and our ideas. And to the center, there's always which means the heart of the skies and the heart of earth coming together in a balance. So it's a complementarity. And in all of Maya medicine, you will see patterns in complementary shapes, never in opposition. These 4 colors of the Maya cross called Kahtzub are the 4 colors of corn that exist in Guatemala, which represent the 4 families of the planet. So the Mayas knew that there was the white family in Europe, the black family in Africa, the yellow family in Asia, and the red family in the Americas. This is pre-Hispanic. They already gave thanks to God for creating the 4 basic families of Earth. And this Kahtzuk, you will see everywhere in Maya cosmovision. It's in the headpiece of my teacher, Simeon Takira. Every ceremonial offering, you will see the 4 cardinal points marked, always first to the sun and the east. But this also represents the 4 elements I was saying, fire, earth, water, and wind. And they have very concrete applications in Maya medicine. So for example, if you have an ulcer in your stomach, it's an imbalance between fire and earth. And so a Maya priest will give you treatments with plants that counteract the excess fire or the excess wind. Chiltepe is a type of chili that you eat raw in 13 counts, and that you eat when you haven't had any breakfast, and it treats ulcers. This is being studied right now by doctors in Europe too. But this principle can get applied in scales all the way to Mother Earth, where, for example, a scorched earth situation is understood as a depletion of element earth, and it should be counteracted by giving it plants, not only water. So it's applied in scales, and you will see everywhere in the Maya world this kaktsuk. That's Amines, who is holding what seems to be a Christian cross, but it's not. It's this kaktsuk that represents balance, and he always had this in his altar. That's a pre-Hispanic vessel from Ixinche that also shows the kaktsuk, again, the headpiece of Don Simeon, and many other places in everyday life, you will see this kaktsuk pointing always to the east. But the important thing is that this has a very concrete application in Maya medicine. So treatment is offered for illness in a holistic fashion, and therapies cover all aspects of the being. It's physical body, it's spiritual body, mental, and emotional. And I'll give you a couple of examples of how this is used. But first, I would like to explain a second principle in Maya medicine, which is Huachalal. This principle says that everything is interconnected. As above, so below, as outside, so within. So Huachalal means you are me, I am you, and we are all one. And this gets concrete applications as well in Maya medicine. It always starts from sunlight. Sun gives the potential of everything to exist, soil, plants, animals. And the conception is that we are all interconnected. So in Maya life, everything happens in fractals, mathematical basis of 13 by 20. And the reason why I want to share with you is because sometimes we are misled to believe that Maya science or indigenous science is only based on esoteric, ungraspable principles. And even though it is a fact that energy plays a big, big role in Maya medicine and you cannot really quantify a lot of it, it does follow a lot of very interesting mathematical patterns. So I want to give you an example of how this is applied. The idea is that this 13 by 20 fractal base is applied again from the microcosmos to the macrocosmos, all the way from understanding DNA to the movement of the planets. So people will ask, why do you mean a fractal? 20 amino acids and 13 pH states to interact with them. If the Maya people talk about pH and acidity and alkaline bases for producing medicine in the body, they will depict it as pyramid, where 7 is the middle, perfect balance. That's what we know pH is neutral. And if you then go to the human body, you find the same fractal in our body, because we do have 20 fingers that represent the 20 main energies in Maya thought, the 20 nahuales. Each one of us was born in a specific day, and we have one of those nahuales dictating all of our life. It's as if you were born under a specific energy that represents a preconditioning of your physical body. And Maya doctors understand this to then use plants to regulate our bodies. But these 20 interact with 13 main articulations in the body that you see there. And of course, the last one is the neck, which we move. Those are 13 main articulations in our body. So again, that fractal, 20 fingers by 13 articulations gives 260, which is exactly 9 months, the time it takes a human baby to form in the womb. So you can imagine that this calendar is the Chotich. It's a 260 base calendar that is only used for healers and midwives to use in health, for human babies and mothers all the way to illnesses that are complex. And what it means is an achid, which is a day keeper, it's a keeper of time. It's a keeper of the patterns of life that the sun begins to count, because the count begins always in the one representing the sun, and it moves through life. So in order to be an achid or day keeper or a spiritual healer, you need to understand the mathematical countings of all these calendars. There's another calendar called the Ha'ab, which is the 360-day calendar. Again, in one full solar year, the Maya people developed a calendar that had 18 months by 20 days. So there's your 20, but also 13 moon cycles in a year. So again, the fractal pattern, not only for, we saw the one in babies before, the one for human life. Now this is the one for the planet, for all life in the planet. This is the agricultural calendar. Well, it makes 360, which is a full circle, plus 5 days called Valle, where all rules are suspended and life is choosing whether it'll go another year or not, in Maya thought. But the point of showing you these is not that, obviously, we're not going to become experts in calendars, but just to get an idea that these fractals occur everywhere. The longest application of this 13 by 20 fractal is the projection of the nadir zenith cone of light of Earth into the future or the past, which now we know tracks the movement of Earth around our known galaxy. It's 5,200 years. And this is exactly 13 Bactunes. You can see in there that one Bactun is 400 years, 20 by 20. And 13 Bactunes, again, actually measure how our Earth moves through our known galaxy. And there are a number of calendars. This is the Cobas Stela, where this was predicted, the creation day of the 5th sun, which was not the end of the world, but the beginning of a new large cycle. In this date was when the Maya people agreed to work with our Swiss colleagues, because the prophecy said that there was then time to give the gift to the world that they had been holding on for so long. But they wanted to choose a Swiss partner for very specific reasons. And there are calendars for the synodic cycles of Venus, Jupiter, and Mars, always following the 13 by 20 fractal. Having explained that principle, I would like to go straight into the use of daylight in Maya medicine. And sometimes what seems very poetic turns out to have a very scientific background. Healer Nicolas Kaal is showing us a plant. And he says, well, this plant, we cure incurable illnesses you call cancer with the energy of the Father Sun. The spirit of the plants responds to the life energy of Father Sun and regenerates the skin, balancing all the energy of the patient. The light that is most useful is that of dawn, when the sun is red. Now, if an anthropologist listens to this, we'll get excited. But thank God, Professor Balt was in this group, and he said, that's not only the application of what we call Ahpu, sunlight principles, that is actually photodynamic therapy. Because it seems like the plant acts as a photosensitizer that when applied on the skin, on the cancer of the skin, it reacts with daylight and creates this process of apoptosis or cell death layer by layer, treating skin cancer. So what we saw was that this principle was actually used by a lot of healers. And this is just one example of skin carcinoma treated by Nana Panchita, Francisca Salazar. And I don't know if you can see the picture clearly, but that's a patient that had almost the size of a baseball in his face, which Dr. Garzusi, an oncologist that was part of this study, diagnosed as skin carcinoma stage 4. So he already had metastasis. The issue is that Nana Panchita actually diagnosed extreme depression leading to cancer and an imbalance of his heart soul that led to the losing of his soul. Now, what that means in Maya thought is that the principles I showed you before, Katsuk, which is equilibrium, and Wachalal, will get applied in every treatment. In this case, she first saw the energy of the patient from those 20 Nahuales that I showed you, and she said, oh, he is a 2-Ik, which means people with the Ik symbol tend to have very weak immune systems, according to Maya medicine. So he was predisposed to getting very ill. Physically, she treated the tumor in his face. Emotionally and in his mind, she also provided treatment for him and his family because of the mourning of his wife that had led to his depression. So in her thought process, if she only treated the tumor, he would not be healed. So she started doing ceremonies for him and his daughters so that the environment in the house would change. And he treated spiritually the family by having a ceremony to call back the spirit of this land. The point I'm trying to share is that these concepts of Maya thought get systemically applied from the individual level where plants are used to the community level, to the concept of the joining of Mother Earth and of the cosmos and the elements. So there's always an offering to be done to Mother Earth and ceremonies, fire ceremonies to get to balance on the patient's life. In this case, you can see the effect of the treatment. That's only after 4 months. What was the treatment? A ceremony, as I told you, to balance energetically and change. She also gave counseling to deal with the mourning, change in diet, and an unguent, a mixture of 4 plants that had to be applied under direct sunlight. Now, she's never given me permission to share these 4 plants, but last night she agreed to share 2. One is apazote, Hispania ambrosioides. One is yanten, plantado mayor. And 2 more I cannot reveal, but you can guess which one is the 4th. It's a known photosensitizer. The point is, she also applies only the red spectrum of light to these particular treatments. And plants that she uses belong to categories of energies in the upper graph. Each Maya symbol of the 20 I showed you represents specific energies that get associated to plants and then chosen specifically for treatments. So in a nutshell, we kept doing this for many times, having doctors, Maya doctors, diagnose the same patient as a biomedical doctor and come up with ideas about what they had. The purpose of this boundary science mechanism was to instigate a dialogue that doesn't occur in real life. Have any of you who are from the medical field here ever had the chance to talk to a healer? Unless someone presents you with the opportunity, mutual learning is not a given. So what we found out is that when both systems presented their treatments to the patient, in every single case, the patient would do both. This is a case of patient with leptospirosis, which is a very severe zoonotic disease that we researched in Petem. And every single time the patient would choose both the antibiotic and the hospital and the healer's soul calling and plants, and felt much happier to integrate both. So when we were doing this research, almost done, we wanted to understand what was going on in the mind of the healers relating to how they choose treatments. And what we realized is we were looking at mental models of disease transmission for zoonotic disease, particularly brucellosis and leptospirosis, which are transmitted mostly from cows and rodents. And we realized that in the Maya thought so benevolent that animals can't harm us. They don't really give us many diseases. But what we found was an energetical concept of disease where Maya people would explain leptospirosis as our physical body hurt the physical body of an animal. He translated it into an energy like Ahmad from the 21s, and then that energy goes to us and we get ill. And when we use that concept in the public policy domain, then our interventions were more efficient than when we were insisting on the biomedical explanatory model. But by doing this research, finally we understood that the health of humans and animals are inextricably coupled because the plants basically get used on both photosensitizers and plants that have effects on one. So sometimes animals get tested to see if they're good for humans. So after that, we decided to expand this research by training a number of ihab or traditional healers to do research with us. And this was a project where Professor Heinrich also led from UCL. And what we did was collect through participatory methodologies more ethnography that we knew what to do with. So the healers started recording patient cases as number one. We went to collect the plants. It took years and identify them at the herbarium. But with this solid base of 488 samples, we found 174 different species. But for each one, we had the treatment. We had the ethnography of how it was used, when, in what amount. And that led us to see the importance of plants in Maya treatment. You cannot see it there, but 83% of all treatments recorded include a plant, which then led us to see the importance of collecting these species in the forest, as 63% of all plants in all treatments came directly from the forest. That map shows the collection sites for the healers, and you can see they're collecting in very degraded areas. the importance of these research, not to go into the details, but if you see the map, you see the disappearing biomes. The places where plants are collected are disappearing because of fast degrading ecosystems for cattle expansion, palm oil, and other issues. But the interesting thing is when we built these maps with the healers, they finally said, now you understand what we mean. The health of humans, animals, plants, rivers are inextricably coupled. Father, sun will continue to shine on us, but we destroy the atmosphere, we destroy the forest that reduce its heat, it will kill our earth. So this led us to understand that plants are related to all those fractal energies that we saw before, and that these are important in recuperating the balance of humans and animals. So the sun can only act through an intermediary plant to help us reduce our illness, but there are also other treatments where the sun gets applied directly, especially to cure depression. Cutaneous leishmaniasis is also another example of how plants and sunlight get applied together. And I don't have time to go into the details, but we may have found over 12 species that are reactive to sunlight to treat different ailments in this area. And to finish, I just want to say that because of all this research, we finally ended in that Maya Quechua people have a concept called Kawilal. Kawilal means the health of Mother Earth, inextricably coupled to Kawilal Shikul, which is the health of animals, and Kawilal Nikomon, which is the health of humans. And these get measured in very concrete ways. So if you disrupt any of the balance in these systems, you'll get poor lakes, destroyed ecosystems, bats closer to your home, transmitting disease and biting you because there are no mammals in the forest anymore to eat from. So of course we have an increase in bites in homes now where the forest has been destroyed. And as we know from COVID-19, zoonotic disease is probably also the next pandemic. So for the healers, we are directly responsible for keeping Kawilal, one health, understanding the interconnectedness of everything. And that's their message they asked me to bring today, that we all have a responsibility in this. We're now applying this concept in a new project where we are listening to communities and they are creating indicators of health in their own belief system to say to an old lady, how would you measure the health of your land and the health of your animals? And then combining that with top science, obviously, to do an integration with water studies, soil studies, as we understand them in modern academia, and joining the two to get proof of how both cultures can understand a better and healthy planet. So this is the goal now, is to continue to expand this knowledge, and the elders are trying very hard to protect these disappearing species. So one invitation to the Daylight Academy is to think, can we collaborate in an interdisciplinary way? Because the healers are attempting to create a Popol Jay, and we would love to work with architects that know about sunlight and design it for the betterment of the plants, for creating small habitats to reproduce so we can keep different types of species as a bank repository for the world. Thank you so much for your attention.